Aloha, good Monday morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us here on the COVID-19 Care Conversation. It's a conversation brought to you by the Hawaii Executive Collaborative and Hawaii Pacific Health, a place where we bring experts and leaders in our community to talk about the response to the coronavirus here in the islands. Good morning, I'm Yenji Denise.
And I'm Ryan Kalei-Suji. Great to start, yet another week with all of you. We see some of these comments coming in, and that's exactly like we want to see. We want to see where you're watching from. Encourage you to share this video. And again, today we will be speaking with Governor David Ige, sort of getting an update. We saw some of these restrictions that were initially put in place begin lifting last week through the weekend. Want to get an update from the governor on some of those lifts, as well as when we can potentially see other things begin to reopen for business. We're excited to get to talk to him once again. So if you have questions for the governor, please put them into the comments. And as always, we like to start off our conversation each morning by sort of providing an update with our latest count.
That's right, and we have nothing but good news to report. 17 deaths across the state. That is the total that has stayed constant for some time now. As of noon Sunday, one new case, a total of 640 positive cases throughout the islands. So the good news is that there's been no new infections have been down to single digits since April 18th, and the count has not exceeded 4 new cases per day for the last month. 2 days out of the last month, we had 0 cases. So all in all, we are talking about great numbers. We really do see that flat curve that we so desperately need here in the islands.
And one of the things that we're going to be asking the governor is sort of the process for when things potentially could be restricted again if case numbers go up, what those numbers look like. Because over the weekend, we saw beaches here on the island of Oahu open up. We saw that earlier last week with some of the other counties. But this is what it looked like over in Kailua, with many people flocking back to the beaches over the weekend. It was a sight that a lot of people were excited to be able to be on the beaches and to be there to gather. But obviously, some social distancing limitations with the beaches, and a lot of people still being in close proximity to each other. But I know a lot of people were just excited to be back out there on the sand and be able to enjoy not only the beaches, but retail stores also were given the green light here on the island of Oahu that began on Friday as well. So sort of getting an update from all of that, as well as hearing more things on what the state is doing. Joining us now is Governor David Ige, who's joining us again here on Monday. Governor, good to see you again on this Monday. How are you doing? How was the weekend for you?
It was a great weekend. Thank you guys again for having me on. I really appreciate it.
We see those crowded beaches. Obviously, we want people to continue their social distance. You know, Ryan and I were talking about, just as we start to see retail opening up, as we start to see the beaches opening up, what are you watching when it comes to that second wave? We've had single digits for a number of days now, which is great to see. But what's the threshold for scaling back? How do we know that we're doing this right?
So we are going to be later on kind of presenting the entire reopening plan, not specific to dates, because we're looking at phases and what we see in terms of cases. We don't have a hard and fast kind of threshold. Let's say if it goes above 10 per day, that we're going to be shutting down. The real question is the nature of the cases and how it was spread. So it's really important for everyone that they maintain social distancing, that they should avoid gatherings other than within your household. That's really important moving forward. If everybody continues to do that, stay home when they're sick so that they don't infect others, and really maintain social distancing. We don't expect that we would see a huge spike, but we do expect to see some increase in the number of cases.
Sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
I just want to bring in some of the questions and see if we can get these in, because we do have questions that were submitted earlier, but we also want to get in the ones that are coming in now. One of the questions, of course, continues to come up. Beauty salons, one of those businesses that people would love to be able to get their haircuts again. When do you foresee that happening? I know you talked about sort of the phasing out. What part of the phase is that included in, and when can we expect maybe some of those businesses opening up?
So Ryan, the island of Maui County has proposed, and I did approve opening of beauty shops and hair salons beginning May 25th. I know that all the mayors are looking at that dead date and looking at whether they can incorporate similar things. The plan that we will be announcing later today really includes most of the medium risk of businesses, including hair salons, in the next round of opening. So I would expect be around the end of May, beginning of June is when statewide those would be open for everyone to go to.
One of the questions we keep getting is about inter-island travel. And the last time you were here, you were saying that you were hoping in the next 2 to 6 weeks, which is a pretty large time frame, or maybe one island at a time. What's the update on that?
Certainly on the meeting, I'm having a meeting with the mayors today, and that's the number one topic is inter-island travel and whether we would be able to reopen that. So I do expect sometime this week that we would make an announcement on inter-island travel.
One of the things when you consider inter-island travel is also where people might be staying, and we see a lot of hotels that are shut down. So if guests are, visitors or residents are flying, I should say, between islands, might we be able to see some of these other hotels potentially opening up as well to accommodate some of these kama'aina that are looking to make maybe a weekend vacation?
Certainly, Brian, I don't anticipate that any of the hotels that are currently closed would reopen just for kama'aina travel. But I am told that every hotel that continues to be open has more than adequate space for a significant increase in the number of visitors they're getting. So my guess is that they wouldn't be reopening of hotels even as we allow inter-island travel. They are waiting for when we would welcome visitors from the mainland as well as international. And that's weeks, if not months, in the future.
Sheila Beal has this question, which touches right on that. Says, "Thank you for the Q&A. What advice do you give to visitors who have vacations booked in July, August, and so on? Is it safe for people, or financially safe rather, not physically safe, to make those bookings? There are airlines that are selling these tickets. Last time you were on, you talked about potentially taking photographs at the airport of visitors coming in to enforce the quarantine. Should people start to make vacation plans from the mainland to come here in the later summer months, or is that not a wise thing to do?"
Certainly, I think that they can be looking at that, although I think it's premature. I would just make sure, Yanji, my advice would be to make sure that they're not going to be charged with a change or a cancellation fee. And I know that airlines, we've encouraged the airlines to drop those kinds of fees during this period of time. Definitely domestic and international travel is one of the last things that would be brought back.
In kind of expanding on that 14-day quarantine for those visitors that are coming in, we're hearing a lot from the state, from officials, as well as the Senate COVID hearing meetings that are happening about the different ways in which the state can sort of manage all the visitors coming in. And one idea that was being set aside was maybe a few hotels that are maybe sort of quarantine hotels and having visitors that arrive go into these. How realistic is that? And if it's not, what other plan is making maybe the most sense right now and looking to be the most realistic to manage the visitor travel coming in?
We've had conversations with the hotel industry, and they're very much concerned about being branded as the quarantine hotel or the isolation hotel. So they would prefer that the visitors be allowed to make choices. A couple things, just so you know, and your listeners. We are requiring of confirmation, and before we'll release the visitor from the airport, they have to have a confirmed reservation for the entire duration of the quarantine. If they are leaving before the end of the quarantine, they actually have to have a confirmed flight out of Hawaii that demonstrates that they are leaving. And they are not being allowed to leave the airport until both of those things are in place. So we've been working with the hotels and developing, and you've seen some of the hearings, just giving them a single-use key so that if they leave the room, they definitely would be noticed. And we have been working with the county police departments all across the state to coordinate better information flow from the airports to law enforcement. And just like I said, so the photo helps us with enforcement. We are doing a better job of identifying those who are breaking quarantine, and then most importantly, taking law enforcement action.
Can you explain a little bit of the process? I see some questions about what different mayors are doing. When the mayors submit a request for reopening, what channels do the requests go through? Because I know you want sort of, everything to have one standard, if you
Right.
will. How does that actually work? If Mayor Caldwell says, well, I want restaurants open on this day, how does that then work with your office?
So we do have a team in the Attorney General's office who are looking at these requests. I've committed to the mayors that we would turn around a request within 24 hours. In addition to that, the mayors and I are meeting Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays to talk about and certainly encouraging them to share their plans for when they would be reopening. So if you take the restaurants, for example, Mayor Caldwell had his plans and we had a chance to review it. We have been working with the Hawaii Restaurants Association, and a lot of what was in the mayor's rules came from the Restaurant Association. So we reviewed it and approved it relatively quickly within the 24-hour time frame. And then the other mayors and the other counties then had a boilerplate to work from, and all the other islands are looking at the rules that Honolulu promulgated for reopening restaurants. I think all the other mayors are looking at the same thing.
What's your take on restaurants? When do you think you personally will feel comfortable heading out and dining out in a restaurant?
Well, so they will be required to implement social distancing. So at least 6 feet between tables. I met with the restaurant association and they wanted us to remind everyone that clearly they do a lot of sanitation and are subject to a lot of requirements already. They are increasing and doubling the activities. The restaurant association has a number of best practices that they'll be implementing. It's funny, we've stressed so much on multi-use silverware and napkins and a whole bunch of those kinds of activities. The best practice now is going to disposable for all of that activity, and so the restaurants are adapting to that. Menus is a source of spreading virus, so they are moving toward single-use menus in restaurants, or at least having the ability to sanitize the menus between every single patron coming through the restaurant. So I think those kinds of things I see is very assuring. I want the people to know that when restaurants will allow in-person dining, that there will be a much, much higher level of cleanliness and maintaining social distancing than we've seen in the past.
Another question that has come in poses an interesting question. Jill was asking, why are we allowing tourists to book rooms for less than 14 days? Is there a way to flag any, let's say a visitor is arriving, is there a way for the hotels to potentially say, okay, if you're only booking a 5-night stay, that could raise some red flags about your intent to stay here, and knowing that you're not planning to stay for the 14 days, that they may be looking to do something else. Is there a way to sort of track those types of things and the length of stay?
Yeah, certainly, Ryan. That's one of the changes we've made to the process, because what was happening is that people were coming in, they may have a reservation for 14 days, and then they actually come in and change it and cancel after one day. So now we won't accept them or let them leave the checkpoint at the airport. The quarantine is 14 days or less, depending on your length of stay. So if your length of stay was 5 days, then you had to have a confirmation for 5 days. And now we are requiring them to actually have a confirmation of a flight on the 6th day out of state. So they need to have all of those things before we allow them to leave the checkpoint. So they can't be checking in and then trying to break quarantine before they leave. You know,
Gabriella Hayes. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Governor. Sorry.
no, I was just going to say, and the hotels have been very cooperative with us, working to ensure they don't want people who are breaking the quarantines here either. And they've been very helpful in coordinating the information and ensuring, one, that when the visitors check in, they understand what quarantine means. You are to stay in your room for your entire visit and not leave. And they are enforcing it as best as they can.
Gabriella Hayes says if restaurants can open on June 5th, when can small neighborhood bars open? I know the paper's front cover story today is about just that, about bar owners saying, well, when are we in line? Because if they don't have a kitchen and they don't serve food, then they're not included in those restaurant reopenings. When do you think bars can reopen?
Bars, when we do the risk assessment, is in the highest risk category, and a lot of it is just because standing at the bar or being in a bar is always packed beyond what you would normally see or be able to do in a restaurant. So clearly the bars are in the last category of businesses that we would be reopening.
Okay. Another question that's coming in right now from Laurie is like, would you consider letting residents that are returning to Hawaii from the mainland to not quarantine before visiting non-residents?
Can you ask that question again, Ryan?
Yeah, so
Sorry, it was breaking up.
I think her question is if you consider letting residents that are returning to Hawaii from the mainland, would you consider them not having to quarantine if they're visiting other non-residents? So if they are coming in from the mainland to not have to go through that 14-day quarantine if they're visiting non-residents?
No, anyone who is coming in who is coming to the islands, the last cases on Hawaii Island was actually residents who traveled to a hotspot. They went to California, got infected, and actually returned and became positive. So residents who leave the state and return are required to undergo the 14-day mandatory quarantine, regardless of who they would be visiting.
Anne Medeiros has a question, and I saw this come up on Instagram over the weekend too. Anne Marie Medeiros asking, what is being done to deal with local residents violating group gatherings at beaches and homes? They're posting on social media too. Seems like only tourists are getting flagged. Are you concerned about people who are not from the same household now that we start to see these single digits maybe getting a little relaxed and having parties or gatherings that aren't supposed to be happening right now?
We certainly are, and we want to stress with all of the residents, we can only be successful if everybody takes responsibility. And gatherings outside of your family or those who live in your residence is really a high risk activity. So we're working with the county police departments all across the state to look at better ways to enforce the social distancing requirements. Having a party of more than 10 people is really not allowed today. And we definitely are looking at, if we are aware of gatherings, we certainly are committed to enforcement and breaking them up if we can.
And Lake Maddow has a question about an estimate on when the quarantine will be lifted. I assume that Lake is talking about this sort of safer at home order. How long do you anticipate this continuing?
The ending the mandatory quarantine for incoming travelers will be with us. Right now we're extending the quarantine today to the end of June. We are taking it a month at a time, but the mandatory quarantine for incoming visitors and residents will continue at least for a while.
Okay, one of the questions or one of the things that we're hearing about are, again, these unphasing and these loosening of some of the restrictions that were initially put in place. And we've heard about this color-coded system that the state is working on. We've heard it come up in some of the legislative briefings and people of the administration talking about that. Can you give more information about this system and if it's something that will be made public soon, or what can people expect with this color-coded system that we're hearing about but haven't really gotten a lot of information on?
Yeah, so Ryan, we'll be announcing that today. So it definitely will be public, and we'll uh, be circulating it extensively. And it really follows the health alert that many who travel see it already. You know, alert level 4 is the highest alert level. We refer to that as red, stay at home. So that's strict, highest level, strictest social distancing, stay at home mandate. The next level is orange, and I would say that currently we're in the orange level, which is alert level 3, and that's active virus activity. The next level down is yellow, and that's alert level 2, and that's some community spread, but very low activity. So, you know, I would say the last 3 weeks, we've actually seen just focusing on the virus activity, we're probably at the yellow level on that, and that's kind of the next level we'll be moving to. And then green is really very, very little virus spread, and you know, the new normal would be at the green level.
I've heard from a lot of parents, especially after our discussion with Dr. Kishimoto, about wanting the libraries to reopen. I know that's a tough one because, you know, how do you regulate how many people can go in and out of the library? There's obviously, you know, an access issue there. Would you consider making books to go available, if you will, that you could order library books online, similar to the way that you already can and you have them at the circulation desk, but, you know, just doing some kind of a socially distanced thing where you check it out on your phone and then get the books to go, since so many families are stuck at home. I've just gotten a lot of questions from moms about, you know, having access to books right now.
Yes, so I'm actually meeting with the state librarian Stacy Aldridge today to really talk about what does the library look like as part of the reopening. So we've heard a lot of different things. I think Stacy has some ideas. You know, Yanji, for a lot of people, free Wi-Fi in all the public libraries is one of the few places that you don't actually have to purchase anything to get access to free Wi-Fi. So we know that the libraries are a hub in communities for various activities, and we definitely want to reopen them, but they will be different. And I certainly will take that suggestion of books to go back when I meet with Stacy today.
One other question that we had coming in, and maybe this is just more for clarity, just basically talking about the 10 or less ruling. So there is allowance, especially I think when the beaches open, and here on Oahu, it was said that 10 or less gatherings were allowed, but it had to come from the same household, correct?
Right.
Can you maybe explain or provide an idea of when the 10 or less, I should say, gatherings outside the household might be allowed?
Yeah, so that is one of those things that that we're talking through right now, Ryan. And you know, right now, what we're saying is that the only gatherings really should be within the household, and people that you know and you are pretty confident are not infected with the virus, right? So that next level, when it becomes 10 or less unrelated people, then it just gets to, you know, do we want people who are not familiar with each other and confident gathering. So, you know, at this point in time, we are restricting gatherings to only those people that you interact with on a regular basis. You know, I have to check the next order because the order that I'll be issuing today, we migrate from safer at home to what we're calling act with care. So really getting back to allowing more social interactions, but just reminding people that if they're sick, they should isolate, and that you should maintain social distancing, even if you're gathering in groups. Try and stay 6 feet away and wear a mask. You know, all of those things help stop the spread of the virus and infection.
Dr. Kishimoto shared last week that they are going to be having some in-person instruction this summer with classrooms at, you know, 6 to 8 students, pretty limited, and employing social distancing. When we look at the fall, obviously we don't have enough teachers to have every classroom only have 6 to 8 students. What are you anticipating for fall?
We're actually meeting in the next few weeks to develop a plan for fall. Dr. Kishimoto and the private schools will be getting together and really talking about, there's a lot of issues, Yanji, that we know we just can't run. I mean, anybody who has a toddler, a kindergartner, first grader knows that there's no way for you to tell children you can't come within 6 feet of some other student. So, we are going to be talking with all the public and private schools and the mayors and decision makers to really talk about what risk is acceptable. If you look at bus transportation, it's impossible to run the school bus system, especially for very remote communities. If you look at Hana, Kau on Big Island, North Shore on Oahu, it's impossible to have bus service for public schools in a way that you're only utilizing every other seat or the students are 6 feet apart. So we are going to be talking about what screening and how we can make schools safer in general. Asking parents to be strict about not sending their children to school when they're sick and other kinds of activities to really determine how we will reopen schools in the fall. It's impossible to maintain 6 feet social distancing, especially for the younger children. It's impossible to maintain 6 feet of distance in bus service. So, is the community willing to take those risks? And how can we work together to reduce the risk of infection to the best way possible?
I know we're wrapping up time here, so I'll try to keep this as short as possible. But what we're going to be talking to Director Murakami again tomorrow. We know that the unemployment office continues to receive a lot of requests that continue to come in. One of the concerns that some analysts are looking at is this first round of PPP that were cleared in that first round will come to an end very soon, in maybe in about 3 or 4 weeks that'll be ending up. And some people are concerned that when that runs out, business is not nearly where it should be in order for these businesses to stay afloat. Thus, they're expecting another wave of potential more filings for unemployment. Is there anything that the state is looking at or working with the federal government? Could we maybe see another round of PPP coming through? What are sort of the things that the state is doing to prepare for that next wave and the people that are sort of losing the time basically from their first extension of that PPP loan?
So a couple of things, Ryan. Obviously from the business perspective, they are required to rehire people or they would, have to give the money back. So we're working with really coordinate that activity. If a business offers to rehire an employee and they choose not to come back, then how do we make sure that the business doesn't get penalized? So we are working on both ends of that. We have expressed to the congressional delegation as they're looking at additional stimulus legislation that extending unemployment benefits, especially for the PPP program, would be helpful to many businesses as the time that they needed to cover is clearly insufficient. So, we are working on both ends trying to get additional support for small businesses, especially.
Okay, Governor. Well, first of all, we thank you again for your time. Again, you're going to be sharing more, I believe, later this afternoon on sort of this next sort of round. Anything else that you wouldn't want to share before we sort of end it here today with you?
No, I just really wanted to thank you for giving me this opportunity. And again, just thanking the people of Hawaii. I am proud to be governor of Hawaii because everyone has really taken to heart the requirements that we needed to take the responsibility so that we have flattened the curve and we can move on and we can restore our economy and think about what life will be with COVID-19. So I just really want to thank you for this opportunity and thank the public for their work in this.
All right, Governor, thank you so much. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you later. Thanks again. Aloha.
Yep. Aloha.
Okay, interesting there. Of course, we see a lot of questions still coming in, and we appreciate all of those. The governor so generously made himself available every Monday in the month of May. So he'll be back next week, and we really appreciate starting off the week with him. He covers so much ground, but a couple of things that are very important, and that is when it comes to, a lot of people were asking about the inter-island quarantine, when that might be lifted. It sounds like that's a conversation that is ongoing, and he says we should expect an announcement sometime this week. So hopefully we'll learn more pretty soon.
Yeah, as well as hearing about salons that will be allowed to be reopened. He confirmed that Maui had submitted a request. I believe it was for the 25th of May that will be allowed. And subsequently, I'm sure a lot of the other counties will be allowed. We'll be hearing more about that color-coded system that we've been hearing so much about. He kind of went into the details between the colors. I believe it was red, orange, yellow, and green, sort of laying out what that color-coded system is going to look like. They're going to be announcing that officially today in that press conference, and try to figure out sort of that next phase, what kind of gets us down into that next area, or that next line, so to speak, of reopening the state.
Yeah, and we saw a lot of you asking about, what about visitors? I think some folks are also asking from out of state right now. Can they plan those Hawaii vacations for July, August, and beyond? He was cautioning folks, make sure you have refundable tickets, make sure you have refundable hotel rooms, because it sounds like he's not really ready to commit to opening up tourism in a really full and robust way in those months just yet. He's not saying don't book, but he's saying that if you do, make sure that you can get a refund in case the quarantine and all the restrictions are still in place, because that's obviously no way to travel to the islands.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting to hear as well about that idea of a quarantine hotel that had been floating around. Him saying that some of the hotels don't want to be branded as that hotel, so it'd be difficult to find that central location, allowing visitors the opportunity to choose what hotel they go to, but having all the hotels have to sort of fall in line with the same mandates that everyone else does. But again, all of this will sort of have to evolve. I'm sure, we're going to be also talking to Lieutenant Governor Josh Green next week to hear a little bit more about some of the things that he has been proposing, including the test that's going to be done before visitors arrive, as well as potential tests that they have to take when they arrive. Again, this seems to be a situation where every week we kind of go down one path and we hear another thing. I think they are still obviously trying to figure out what is the best path forward, because it seems every week we kind of get a different idea of where we're going and some new things. So we'll continue to try to keep you posted and get you those answers from these state leaders as we continue to navigate through this time together.
And Ryan, of course, mentioning that Scott Murakami will be on tomorrow. We saw quite a few unemployment questions. We're saving those for him. If you have questions about the PUA system, if you have questions about unemployment benefits, and I saw a question also about when the office itself will be open. We ask him that every week, and we will ask him that again tomorrow, because I know a lot of people, have been having trouble with the website, trouble with the 1-800 number, and is there a way for them to actually go and talk to a person? I think a lot of people would be much more reassured, even if they had to wait in line for some time, to actually have some face-to-face interaction. Sometimes the technology can be pretty cumbersome.
That's right. So we're looking forward to that conversation. Sort of wanted to highlight some of the other articles really briefly, and encourage you to head over to the Honolulu Star Advertiser's website or grab a paper to get more updates on this. But today, talking some of the headlines coming out there we talked about some of the small businesses that continue to struggle even with that PPP loans. We're seeing some of those businesses saying they still won't be able to maintain or stay in business because of some of the requirements, and just because of the sheer, the demand that it's going to be placed on them in order to get their business up and running, bringing back some of these employees. I think it gives a realistic look into what some of these small businesses and the decisions they're having to make. So there's a great article about some of the small businesses and what they're trying to do to try to just stay afloat, as well as getting an update on some of the new funding that has been allowed for the airport screening processes. We've been hearing more and more about thermal checks that could potentially be starting up again, being implemented, I should say, into the state, as well as potential new testing. So there's another article on that as well.
Yeah, there's also a really interesting article about Hawaii Pacific Health. As we've talked about on this program before, they did widespread antibody testing of their of any employee in their system who wanted one, up to over 7,000 employees. Out of the over 3,000 who did get the antibody testing, less than 1% tested positive. So that is a very low number of healthcare workers that then have the antibodies. we don't know how well, obviously, even having those antibodies, it doesn't mean you're necessarily immune to COVID, but it would show how many people in our community have been exposed. So that's a very interesting number about, interesting article about the antibody testing that's gone on. And we have Dr. Sarah Park, the state epidemiologist, coming on Thursday. We're going to be talking to her about virus testing, antibody testing, and tracing, which are, the buzzwords now we've all learned about what these things actually are. We're going to talk to her, about, is there enough contact tracing happening? Do we have enough workers in that arena? So we look forward to that conversation on Thursday. And you can read more about the Hawaii Pacific Health testing and the results in today's paper. A very, very interesting article there.
That's right. And of course, we like to end every broadcast by highlighting some of the good things that are happening in Hawaii. And one unique sort of campaign that's being started here is really going to be a great way, I think, to really engage some of the familiar faces in Hawaii. It's all for Hawaii, and it's a challenge, a digital fundraiser that is feeding our community through this one-of-a-kind experience. And really what it is, it's connecting some of Hawaii's favorite personalities in sports, fashion, and entertainment to come together and donating of their time for some prized possession. So it's almost like an auction, so to speak, where you have the opportunity to have these one-on-one experiences with these recognizable figures in our community. The goal is to raise $1 million that will go to fight food insecurity for Hawaii. And 100% of the monies raised will go to benefit the Hawaii Food Bank and Maui Food Bank as well. So, whether it be a private surf session with Carissa Moore or ukulele experience with Jake Shimabukuro, as well as with Max Holloway, there's a bunch of different celebrities that have come together to sort of make this happen. And so we encourage you to head on over to check that out, because this, again, is another way that our community is coming together and helping provide support during a very difficult time for so many.
Yeah, this is such a cool thing presented by Mauna Loa. And, like Ryan said, you could play the ukulele with Jake Shimabukuro. You can, I believe it's a golf session with the Flying Hawaiian, or, hitting the water with Carissa Moore. What a great opportunity. And the entries start for $10. So that's a pretty low level entry, so accessible to many people. And we love to see this. And like Ryan said, they're hoping to raise $1 million to help families in need right now. So great to see all those people, those notable people in Hawaii, donating their time for this amazing opportunity.
That's right. So we want to say mahalo to them. Go and check that out again. That's allforhawaii.com. Now, looking forward to tomorrow. We will be speaking with Director Murakami about some of those unemployment questions. So we will do our best to get through as many questions as possible. We'll also be talking to a doctor coming up on Wednesday, including Dr. Sarah Park. So a lot of exciting things still happening this week, and encourage all of you to continue to stay connected with us here on the COVID-19 Care Conversation every day at 10:30 here on the platforms of the Honolulu Star Advertiser. We encourage you to continue to stay safe out there, show some aloha. It's a difficult time. There's a lot of people out there going through some tough times. So find a way to give back where you can, and we will see you right back here tomorrow. Aloha.
Aloha.